Good afternoon and welcome to the last of 3 workshops in the BMP Agricultural Stewardship series. Today we will be focusing on OMAFRA's agricultural tools as well as funding opportunities for BMP projects. My name is Brendan Jacobs and I am the Stewardship Specialist with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, as well as the Coordinator for Alice, Ontario East. I will be your host for today's workshop. Before we get going, I would like to thank everyone for filling out the pre-workshop survey. If you do not have a chance to complete the survey, you can find a link to it in the chat box. The workshop today will be recorded, as we hope to be able to make the recording available to folks who are not able to be with us today. As such, we ask that your camera and microphone remain off throughout the duration of the presentations. We have 4 presentations for you today that will cover topics surrounding agricultural tools, the Farmland Health Checkup, BMP funding opportunities, and tree planting funding opportunities. Today's presentations are pre-recorded to avoid some of the glitches that can happen over the course of a virtual workshop. We will begin the workshop by rolling through all of the presentations, after which there will be a question or discussion period. If at any point during the presentations you have any questions regarding one of the topics, please type it into the chat box below. We will compile the questions and endeavor to answer as many of them as we can live prior to the end of the workshop. If we run out of time, we will be happy to provide answers to you afterwards via email. All the presentations seen today, as well as the ones from our 2 previous workshops, will be made available online in the near future. Now, let's get started. Our first presenter today is Kevin McCaig, which some of you may remember from our first workshop. He will give us an introduction to some of the agricultural tools offered by OMAFRA. Kevin is an agricultural engineer with OMAFRA based out of Woodstock. He has worked in both the public and private sectors, planning and implementing erosion control practices on cropland. He is a member of the OMAFRA soil team and leads the delivery of OMAFRA's agricultural erosion control structures planning and design workshop. Anne Verhallen, a soil management specialist in horticulture with OMAFRA, has also contributed to this presentation. Now here's Kevin's presentation.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me once again to your Lunch and Learn workshops. I was here a couple weeks ago when we talked about some different best for erosion control, and sometimes we give a lot out there in terms of what are some different ideas, but when it comes to selecting one that would be best suited for your farm or your property, it's not always easy to figure it out, because we know that every farm is different, and so what might work in one situation isn't necessarily in the other. But today I just wanted to go. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me once again to your Lunch and Learn workshops. I was here a couple weeks ago when we talked about some different best for erosion control, and sometimes we give a lot out there in terms of what are some different ideas, but when it comes to selecting one that would be best suited for your farm or your property, it's not always easy to figure it out, because we know that every farm is different, and so what might work in one situation isn't necessarily in the other. But today I just wanted to go through some tools that we have to help with soil conservation planning that may assist in selecting some of those options for you. And so let's get started, take a look at some and see what they can do for us. Just a quick outline of what looking at covering the different tools that we have. The Ag Maps Water Erosion Potential Calculator is one I want to go over. Related to that is this tool called Russell 2 for Ontario, or Revised Universal Soil Loss Equation for Ontario. Ag Buffer Builder is something that I want to look at. and then demonstrate those three on an actual field in your area, just to get a feel for what it might say and how you might use it. After that, just look at the cover crop decision tool that the Midwest Cover Crop Councils come out with, and that folks here in Ontario have worked alongside them. Anne Verhollen's here today, and she can answer any questions related to that as well. And so, yeah, we can use that to just look at different cover crop options. And we have a couple other related soil conservation and soil health planning aids, things like the Agri-Action software program, which helps the drainage contractors and other designers design erosion control structures on various properties. And then, of course, the AgriSuite set of tools. And I'm going to focus mainly on the organic amendment calculator. That gives you a good idea of what nutrient contents in your manures that you're spreading on the field. So I'm going to start then with this AgMaps water erosion potential calculator. Now, AgMaps is a geoportal that we have with OMAFRA, so it's online. You can access it by just type Google AgMaps for Ontario, and you will find your way there. The water erosion potential calculator is in the Create Maps section of that tool, and what it can do is allow you to assess the erosion risk on a property, and we allow you to delineate up to 200 acres at any one time. And so its focus is on sheet and rill or water erosion, and so it can give you a map of that property's erosion potential, and we do that by looking at it from a bare soil situation. But we can also estimate what the annual erosion rate might be in terms of sheet and rill erosion, given your current tillage and cropping practices, or perhaps any planned practices you're doing. So that's the two maps that we can generate with that. Russell 2 is available and can assist in some of that annual erosion estimate, and I'll show you that in a bit as well. And we also plan down the road just to be able to use that to identify areas where there's a high risk of gully erosion. We have some maps that are available to do that. We haven't put them up online yet, but hopefully in the next year or two, that will be available as well. But that's mainly for the Lake Erie Basin, just because we needed some really intense digital topographic information to achieve that. And that's where the only place we have it so far. Russell 2 for Ontario, as I mentioned. If you wanted to access that, it's you just Google Russell 2 for Ontario. Now that tool links in with this AgMaps water erosion potential calculator, because you can get more detailed information on what your erosion, how effective your best practices are in terms of tillage and cropping. So it will help with that a little better than just the generic information that's provided in the AgMaps erosion tool. And I'll show you how that works as well. The only negative to Russell 2, it's not the most user-friendly. And so if you did need assistance, there are some YouTube videos available to get you started on it. But if you wanted more information, don't hesitate to contact me by email there, and I could help you out a little further on that if you wanted down the road. Ag Buffer Builder is not something that you can access directly, but it's a tool that your local CA could probably assist you with, or other groups that have an Esri ArcGIS software license. So that's an expensive software tool, but it's really just a one-time analysis for you on various fields. So you wouldn't have to do it every year or anything like that. Unlike the AgMaps tool, it's just a one-time to say, where are the best places to put buffers around this field if you were thinking of establishing permanently vegetated buffers or tree planting, things like that. So that I'll demonstrate that as well. So let's get into some of the demonstrations. I talked to Vincent there at the authority, and he gave me this one example farm site that we could possibly use as the demonstration. And so we'll use that during the mock-ups here. So this is a scan or a picture results from the water erosion potential mapping tool that's in AgMaps. This is the inherent water erosion potential map, or the risk map. So it considers bare soil conditions. What would that farm erode like if it had bare soil, and where would be the highly erodible areas? And so we see this side here on the west side is pretty bad. There's some higher spots here. Anything yellow, orange, red, are going to be pretty vulnerable to risk for erosion. Overall on that property, it's about 5.1 tons per acre per year, which isn't really super terrible when you look at it on the average, but those high in that 5.1 number. And so it's an average, obviously just averages things out. So we want to try to bring that down. Actually, a good number would be somewhere between 0.5 and 1, really, if we wanted to be sustainable in terms of our erosion risk. Now, if you compare the mapping of erosion risk with the slopes and the contours in the area, you can see that the more steeply sloping lands are the ones that have the higher risk score in terms of erosion. And that makes sense because the steeper the slopes, the more erodibility it's likely to be. Soils play a role as well. In this particular case, it was a pretty similar soil type. Now, notice in here that we have this bare zone through here where there's no data. And that's because the soils in that area weren't defined very well in our soil map. It's really an eroded channel, associated with that stream through there. So we didn't have really good numbers of what these soil types were. So it's a limitation. We can only work with the data that we have available. So our soils map's a little weak on that there. But the main tilled area of the field, we've got some decent numbers on. So that's what you might notice if you're running in your property. Say, well, how come I'm not getting that? It could be because the data behind it isn't good enough quality to produce these maps. This is an example of the annual erosion estimate that we have for that field. So let's say they were fall plowing grain corn on that field. We choose that from these various drop-down menus and then recalculate, and it comes up with a map of the erosion risk. Again, the steeper sloping areas are the higher risk, and but with that crop on there compared to bare soil, we are now down to 2 tons per acre. So it's not obviously better than leaving it uncultivated, and crop rotations play a role as well. For example, this is where Russell 2 can help out. We can get some of these management practice factor values from Russell 2 and feed it into the Ag Maps tool. So say the producer is growing a corn, soybean, wheat rotation on that property. We can describe each practice that's happening during that rotation. So beginning with the fall mower plow in the fall ahead of the corn, and saying they're going to cultivate in the spring, and then just before they plant, and then they get a grain corn and they harvest that corn, and then they chisel plow after that to get ready for the soybeans. And so we can describe each practice, and in the end then we can arrive at a C factor or management practice factor, in this case 0.21, that we can feed into that OMAFRA Ag Maps tool. So let's take a look at what that map would look like if we put that 0.21 value for the management practice factor into that tool, and a corn, soybean, wheat rotation that was fall plowed. Again, we've dropped it a bit, went from 2 for that corn situation to 1.1. We still have the steeper slopes, still a little higher than we'd like, but we're getting close to that 0.5 to 1 range. And so, yeah, now we can look at, well, what if we did some other things on the tillage side, like we strip tilled the corn, or we no-tilled the soybeans, or we planted a cover crop? So this next shot is just exactly that. We went into the Russell 2 software, we described those practices, and then we got a value for the management practice factor of 0.09. And then that's with strip till corn, no-till soybeans, no-till wheat with a oat cover crop after the wheat. And now we're getting real down into that 0.4 range. So again, some of the steep areas, maybe a little higher, but generally we're doing a really good job in protecting that soil and reducing soil loss on that field. This is just a description of that strip till, no-till situation. We just directly seeding the oats, the cover crop ahead of the corn, and then just no-tilling the corn. I've added some of the sprayer information in here as well, when every pass that was made on that field in that rotation. But that's where, from entering that information, Russell 2 can give us that management practice factor to feed into the Ag Maps product. We can also show if we built any structures. We can just put little icons there showing, let's say, for example, we wanted to put a rock chute because we're getting water running off this into the ditch. to protect that ditch bank. So we could just put a little icon saying, yeah, there's a rock chute here, or there's a grass waterway through here, things like that. So we can show that in this mapping tool as well. And so maybe before we had a map like this, and then after if we start adopting our erosion control practices, we can show that, yeah, we brought it down. Now, it wasn't that bad before, but we've dropped it in half at least. And so that's a lot more soil through the years and in the future that we can keep for the future generations. So that's just an example of how that can show you some before and after pictures. Now, the ag buffer tool, really it's, as I mentioned, not available directly, but you can do an analysis of where are the best places to establish vegetative buffers around this field if I wanted to buffer the sediment before it hit a ditch. And so obviously in this one, it's going to be largely in that zone where that stream is crossing through that field. And so this one down here, there's maybe some soil coming off there, but there's not a stream or ditch to be impacted. So it's not near as big an issue as these ones up in here where we got direct entry of that sediment into the water course. So these are areas then where we'd want to consider putting buffers and permanently vegetation. That's exactly, I believe, where they established some tree plantings on this site in a year or two. And so I could see a grassed or buffered area along a contour, because if you put it along a contour, that means that water is going to cross it in a sheet flow pattern and it'd be an excellent means of dropping out that sediment that does come by. Now they're, looking at that, yes, there's a loss of cropland there, and maybe that's something that needs to be considered. Or you look at you could continue to do conventional tillage perhaps up here and allow it to catch that sediment this way, or alternatively go with the more reduced tillage approach, the strip till, no till that we talked about earlier, and we can achieve that same sediment reduction. And we're not getting it all built up down here in the buffer as well, as we want to keep that soil right where it is so it can produce the crops, right? So that's the ag buffer demo. The cover crop decision tool, you can access that through this website location here. It's an online product. It includes some Ontario relevant cropping information. It's simple to use. It's got cover crop options that we rank depending on the producer's goals or objectives for that cover crop planting. So just to give you an example of how we might use that on this field, we first establish what is the goal. Is it to control erosion? Is it to provide livestock feed? Is it to control weeds? So that's our first step. So let's say on this field, this would be an example or a screenshot of that cover crop tool. It first asks, well, where is this farm located? We're in it's asked by county. So we go to Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, and then select our goals. So what 3 goals, we could have more than 3, but there's some goals that we want to achieve, and say we want to fight erosion, we want to have a nitrogen source, those kinds of things. So we select it from this drop-down list here. And then this is the next screen where we've selected those goals. So erosion fighting, soil building, quick growth. We want to plant it after the wheat in our corn, bean, wheat rotation. So the earliest chance we've got to plant it might be late June, or late July, early August. We describe the soil a wee bit, drain slowly. There might be a bit of flooding sometimes. And then we go and we find that cover crop that might fit the bill in meeting these goals. So here's the output once we hit that find cover crop button. And it ranks it according to the ability to achieve the goals. So goal 1, this rye cover crop is excellent at achieving that goal of erosion control. It's excellent at the second goal and pretty good at the third goal as well for quick cover. So and then if we look at the dark gray areas where we have the wheat crop in, so we can't really put a cover crop in, but you see the times available to establish those various crops cover crops where we will get some good growth happening. So that's how you can look at that and use that cover crop tool to come up with that. Now, if you click on each one of these different cover crop options, you actually can get even more information from this tool. It's a spec sheet that we have, or an information sheet. And so it'll give you information on planting information, how to establish the crop, planting rates, termination information, how do you kill it when you need to go to the next crop, what is the potential disadvantages or advantages of this particular cover crop, and things like that. So some really good information there. And there's also some links to some other fact sheets and information available through the OMAFRA website. Other tools we have out there are the Agri-Erosion for erosion control structure design. Now that's a desktop product only, and it assists with things like designing grass waterways, wascobs, rock chutes. We offer training on this software and this tool to drainage and erosion control contractors or other people interested in designing such things, usually late February, early March in the Guelph area. So if you're interested in signing up for that training, it's a 4-day event. And so we do offer that. And yeah, people then can use that to sort of figure out how to size those structures and go through the design steps with them. Now, just a quick overview of what the design steps might be for a water and sediment control basin. And with most of these these structural measures, is really the first step is just figuring out, well, how much water is going to be hitting that structure, and so what's the contributing watershed, how big is it? So in this example, there's a 3D picture of that field, and there's a narrow draw here where the soil started cutting through this gully area. So they want to put a wascob here, and so the area above that would be the area contributing water to this point. So this is just the plan view of that same field, and so we're able to estimate the area of that watershed to be about 10, 11 hectares. And so that's kind of key information you need to start designing these erosion control structures. Here's sort of a list of the main steps that the Agri-Erosion tool works through. You delineate that watershed area so that you can then estimate the flows and the peak flows from that watershed area that the structure has to handle. For the wascob, then from that you can calculate the required berm height that you need. How high does it have to be to hold back that water? What size of outlet do you need to drain that water, and any emergency spillway you might need to get it off there within 24 hours so that it doesn't damage the crop that is flooded for that temporary period of time. And then you would finalize all the dimensions, and it outputs a summary graphic of what you've ended up with, so that you can then use that to go out to the field to do the design and do the construction. Other OMAFRA tools, the nutrient management planning suite called AgriSuite, that's available anywhere online with a phone, tablet, or desktop, and that's really from the chemical standpoint of soil health, matching your crop nutrient needs with your fertilizer, manure availabilities. And you can assess the risk of that nitrogen leaving the field, things like that, with the various products in AgriSuite. So I won't spend a lot of time on that, but this is just an example of, say, on that farm, dairy manures to be applied in the fall, and going to incorporate it with a tanker at 7,000 gallons per acre. Well, with that plan, you get about 74 pounds per acre of nitrogen, 116 pounds per acre of phosphorus, and about 190 pounds per acre of potash. And that would work out to about $81 of nutrient value if you had to go out and buy those nutrients to do the same thing. So again, if you want to look at the AgriSuite tool, just Google OMAFRA's new AgriSuite, and you can find the organic amendment calculator and things like that in there. So those are the tools that we have. There are some instruction videos around for the various tools, not always the most professional, but they can get you through and get you into using the various tools a bit better. And so you can try them out. Again, if you had any questions, you can contact myself or Ann as well to get some more training on how to use these products. So that is really all I have today for you. I just thank you for letting us attend. And if you have any questions, we'll be around to answer them, hopefully. Take care.
Thank you very much, Kevin and for contributing to that presentation. Excellent topic and really well covered. I myself learned a lot with that one. As mentioned earlier, if you have any questions for Kevin or for any of our other presenters today, please send them to the chat box below. And we will endeavor to answer as many of them as we can live after we've run through all the presentations. Our next presentation is on the farm health checkup, which is newly available to farmers within the Raisin Region Conservation Authority watershed. Presenting today will be Ruth Knight. Ruth is an advisor, mentor, and facilitator to farmers, land managers, and communities. Ruth completed a Bachelor's of Science in Agriculture and a Master's of Science in Rural Planning and Development at the University of Guelph. From 1992 to 2011, Ruth co-owned a mixed livestock farm. Since 2005, Ruth has provided services to a diversity of farmers, businesses, and researchers. Ruth's mission is to be a catalyst for the transformation to regenerative, healthy agro-ecosystems. Welcome, Ruth.
Hello, my name is Ruth Knight, and I'm joining you today to give an overview of one of the tools that would be available to you provided through the Agri-Action project with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. So I have a brief PowerPoint presentation to discuss and review the farm health checkup. I'm just going to share my screen to give you an overview of that program and my experience with it. So my name again is Ruth Knight. I'm a professional agrologist and certified crop advisor. And through the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, I have completed training in delivering the farm health checkup and completed a number of these for various farmers in Ontario. So the farm health checkup, or I'm going to call it the checkup, or the acronym is FHCU. It was developed by an OMAPRA team along with some advisors from various agencies, as well as professional crop advisors, as well as farmers. It is delivered by the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, and so far it has been provided to farmers in the Leeds geography. That's Lake Ontario and Lake Sinclair watershed. And it has been a requirement for those farmers who are looking specifically to the cost share funding available in the Leeds program. It has been a requirement to complete the farm health checkup. And the farm health checkup, what its unique quality is that it provides the technical advisors to farmers to complete. So the objectives of the checkup are to improve soil health of the farmland and to reduce the nutrient losses, phosphorus and nitrogen from agricultural production, as well as provide co-benefits, enhancing pollinator habitat, reducing greenhouse gases, strengthening resilience to climate change, as well as strengthening the sustainability of the agriculture sector. So as I said, the program, the Farm Health Checkup, it connects and pays technical advisors, professional agrologists, and certified crop advisors to work with farmers to complete the Farm Health Checkup. And what is involved is an assessment of farm soil health and pollinators, and then developing a list of best management practices targeted to the farm operation, and then designing a strategy to implement improvements. Well, let's look at the components of that. So the specific challenges addressed on the left, you'll see a whole checklist of the various aspects of soil health and nutrient management, as well as pollinator health that are reviewed in the farm health checkup. Water erosion, wind erosion, tillage erosion, compaction, organic matter, looking at soil life, reviewing soil chemistry and phosphorus and nitrogen levels utilized in a nitrogen or in a nutrient or fertility management, as well as pollinator health. And putting all those together, all those various components, the objective then is to lead to management practices that would improve water quality, improve soil health, as well as reduce the escape of nutrients from the edge of field and address the nutrient reduction targets in the watershed. So there are two parts to the checkup. I'm going to refer to these as the workbook. So this is where all of your information of your farm and your soil and your management are dumped into the workbook. So there's a whole collection of all of those components go into the workbook. It's all dumped in there. And then what comes out of that is the assessment. So the assessment includes a scoring of the information that you've put in there and the practices and the conditions of a poor, fair, good, or best. And the objective in terms of choosing best management practices is that you would address any of those that are a score of 1, 2, or 3 and advance them to a score of 4 or 5. And then as the assessments are all lined up, then the priorities and a rating of a priority of setting a strategy of how do you want to address those over the short and the long term. So the aspects in the workbook, so that's dumping all the information in there on the soil health, the water quality, and nutrient management. That is pertaining to 3 fields that you select from your farm. So field 1 would be the least challenging. So either it has more consistent or better yield, and it gives us a relative target to aim for. Field 2 is a challenging field, as well as field 3 would be the most challenging. And this is based on a poor or inconsistent field and more environmental risks. Now, these are compared relative to each other, but it also acknowledges that there may be different soil types or different topographical features that makes the challenges relative to the context of that field. So for instance, field 1 may have a clay loam, where field 2 or 3 may have a more sandy type of soil. And this is taken into consideration in terms of, yes, in a context of the soil type, you may not reach the same potential as a field 1. And so that's taken into consideration. And in each of field 1, 2, or 3, there's various best management practices that can always move the assessment from a fair or poor to a good. So while the component of the soil health and nutrient management are on 3 fields, the pollinator health is towards the whole farm. So we take the whole farm into the context of what is reviewed in the workbook. So taking a little stroll through some of the information that would be included and asked is the first question after we put together your identification and your location. We look at aspects of soil health. So this is a little warm up in terms of why you've chosen field 1, 2, and 3. What have been some of the challenges over the last 5 years with these fields and overall, and what you think might be causing lower yields or inconsistent yields, and what are some of the practices that you've implemented. So in each case, there's some questions and assessment of what's going on now, what have you been implementing in terms of best management practices in each of the different question categories. So for instance, under crop growth information, again, you would include all this information field by field, and you may even have a name for that field. And we would look at the crop in terms of how it's establishing and where are the various challenges occurring. So those questions are for each field 1, 2, and 3. And then for each field, we would include a crop rotation, crop history for 5 years, the current year, 2021, and the 4 years leading up to that. We'd include the crop as well as the cover crop, what the crop goal is, and the tillage. What is the cover crop after harvest or going into the winter, after planting, and how many species are included in that cover crop. Some of the other challenges that are looked at in terms of soil health, for instance, is soil crusting or soil compaction and water infiltration. So each of these have a set of questions that go into the overall assessment. So is there any evidence of crusting? Is it been observed? How frequently in the past? Has it had an impact on crop emergence, and where might it be located? So is it on the knolls? Is it in the bottomland? And how much of the field is impacted? And then, as I said, as each aspect of the various practices that you're currently doing are observed and recorded, then there's also an area here to look at, well, what are some of the conservation practices that exist in the field? What have you tried? Buffer strips, grass waterways, windbreaks, cover crops, all of these are for each of the field 1, 2, and 3. Section 3 deals with water quality and nutrient management. So first looking at soil sampling. Do you complete the soil sampling yourself, and do you have a strategy? How often is the soil sampled? And how many acres does the soil sample represent? And when are they taken? And so on. Then we get into the fourth section, which was the pollinator component. So this is looking at the whole farm, and there's an assessment of the presence of various species, fruit trees or pollinator trees or cover crops. And the assessment there is for it's commonly found, or there are some in select areas, or there's virtually none on the farm, all those various species and types of pollinator habitat. So moving on from the workbook, so we've dumped all of the information in here for the 3 fields and the pollinator habitat, and the program automatically comes out with an assessment component. So from the assessment component, we're going to look at the 3 fields individually in terms of, again, the field 1 was the least challenging, and field 2 and 3 challenging, and field 3 most challenging. And there'll be a rating in terms of each factor to improve: crop rotation, tillage, organic matter, and the ratings will be from 1 to 5. 1 and 2 and 3 suggesting that you want to include a best management practice to move those to a 4 or 5. So for each field, there's an identification of a best management practice to implement and some of the rationale. And if that is a priority in terms of when to address that, a target date, and maybe some notes on some supporting activities. So if you want to, identify that you would reduce tillage and add mulch, then you could also monitor the soil organic matter and biological activity. So as the assessment is completed, there is a complete overview from the Farmland Health Checkup of the assessment for each field by field, with the the fair to good, poor, fair, good, and best rating. And there's a numerical value here that's different for each of the aspects that are reviewed according to the weighting and how that's put together within the program. So you've dumped in all the information, there's an overall assessment, and now the challenge is to take all of those pieces and put them into a strategy so you can discern what management practices you want to approach and a priority rating of, do you want to approach them first or second? And so that's the way the program is put together. So to get started in terms of the farm health checkup, you will need a recent environmental farm plan. There's a lot of information that you've already compiled in your environmental farm plan that would be useful for putting this together. The 2 most recent soil tests for each of the 3 fields, and the 5-year cropping history, including the planting, fertilization, tillage, manure applications, cover crops, weeds, and pest management, the yield data, and this will be compared to some of the yield data in your region. If you have a nutrient management plan, there'll be information in there that'll be very useful, and any other information on soil health and pollinator habitat you want to discuss. So how is the farm health checkup completed? It takes about 3 to 5 hours. There's a lot of opportunity there, not just to fill in the information, but have discussions, new information that might be coming to you from the technical advisor, as well as just in what's top of mind for you in terms of what you're seeing, and discussing that with someone who's looking at it from your unique farm perspective. It is all digitized, so it can be completed remotely, and it auto saves the workbook so that you can do it in multiple sessions. You can go through it a couple of hours and take a break and come back and do it again. That means you don't have to do the session in complete 3 to 5 hours. You can break it up. So the workbook is submitted electronically, and as soon as it's received by the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, both the technical advisor and the farmer receive a confirmation email with the PDF of the workbook. So you'll always have the workbook for you as a record in terms of what you answered for all those multiple questions and what you identified, and then you can keep that as a review and change the strategy as conditions require. So the benefits of farm health checkup, you are, as a farmer, you're getting connected and paid for the technical advisor to work with you for your unique farm health checkup. Your farmland checkup. It considers multiple aspects of soil health, nutrient management, and pollinator health, and puts all of this together in terms of tailoring best management practices to suit your unique situation, and a short and long-term strategy to address the challenges. And in this particular case with Raisin Region Conservation Authority, doing it within your watershed, you connect with other farmers and advisors to address environmental challenges and create resiliency to climate change within your watershed. So I thank you for participating, and I look forward to your questions. My contact information is there, and I look forward to discussing this with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Excellent presentation. Very thorough run through of the farm health checkup, which I'd like to remind everyone is available now for farms within the Raisin Region Conservation Authority watershed. And we do have funding available for this through the Agri-Action advisory service as well. I'd now like to introduce Colleen Acres, who will be our third presenter today from the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. She'll provide us with an introductory look at some funding opportunities available for farmers looking to implement BMP projects on their land. Colleen is the regional program lead with Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. In this role, Colleen assists farmers and agribusinesses in Eastern Ontario with navigating grant opportunities, applications, and educational workshops. Colleen farms with her husband and 3 sons near Osgood, Ontario. Welcome, Colleen.
Hi, my name is Colleen Acres, and I work with Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association as a regional program lead located here in Eastern Ontario. I'm going to share with you today some of the programs that Ontario Soil and Crop is privileged to deliver for producers, and also some of the educational opportunities. Before I get into that, just by way of introduction, Ontario Soil and Crop has been around since 1939. Our strength really is in the fact that we have procs involved in a variety of different commodity organizations. And as a nonprofit organization, we really work on helping producers to improve stewardship and seek, adapt, and test and engage in research on new farm production practices. I work on the program delivery side of the organization, and with that, I'm very privileged from the standpoint that I get to also assist in producer education. Be involved in any of the grant programs or educational opportunities. These programs are available to any producer or property owner in the province of Ontario. So just so that you're aware, the first series of slides are regarding our workshops and webinars that we have available. The Environmental Farm Plan, Growing Your Farm Profits, and Biosecurity workshops or webinars are the 3 current opportunities that we have available for producer education. All of these workshops go through a 3-step process in that we work with producers establishing what their farm business current challenges or opportunities are. And then from that, we help them put together action plans to identify ways of addressing these challenges or opportunities. The final step is really about implementing that action plan. So some of the activities that producers might choose to invest in are available and eligible for cost share funding. And so that's the piece I'm also going to share with you today, what some of those project categories are that are available for grants. The Ontario Environmental Farm Plan has been around since the early 1990s. And during that particular workshop, we have producers conduct a self-assessment. That self-assessment is really a series of questions that helps producers see their farm in a new way with an environmental lens on some of their ongoing day-to-day activities, helps them increase awareness about the risks on their property, and identify ways to help them reduce those risks. The goal really is to benefit a farm operations productivity and profitability. We hope to improve that along with addressing sustainability and good stewardship practices. Reducing health and safety is another goal. And many of our programs do require the completion of environmental farm plan prior to being able to access the funding. Currently in the 4th edition of the Environmental Farm Plan, and as such, we continue to deliver in-person 2-day workshops Although there are many producers that have completed the workshops in the past, and so we are adapting and finding other ways of helping those producers renew or update their existing environmental farm plan. And so we've got that producers can simply, from the comfort of their home, go online and update that workbook. Or we are also delivering a one-day renewal workshop where producers are reintroduced to the process and provided with a hard copy binder to go home and completing that environmental farm plan. Workshops are scheduled across the province, and all of the upcoming dates and locations can be found on our website, or simply reach out to me and I'm happy to add a date and additional locations that may be convenient for you in your region, or can help you get signed up and registered for a date that's convenient and works for you. Speak quickly about the other workshops that we have available and then move into the cost share grant opportunities. So Growing Your Farm Profits workshop is really about business planning. And so we encourage producers to consider this workshop as a way to make on-farm productivity and profitability improvements, and then also to help them navigate in Ontario. Bees workshop with the goal of benefiting your farm productivity and profitability. Final series of workshops or webinars that are available are the biosecurity workshops, and these are commodity specific. So we have a livestock that covers sheep, beef, dairy, and goat, as well as poultry workshop, a bees workshop, a mink workshop, and then we've also got generic crops and plants. So for any of the livestock workshops, these are delivered by veterinarians, and the crop and plant workshops the messaging is delivered through certified crop advisors. And the benefits of attending one of these workshops is, of course, access to some of the grant programs, but also understanding the benefits of why biosecurity is important to you, to help look at your current practices and ways that you could reduce risk, as well as working with that veterinarian or workshop. And then we've also got generic crops and plants. So for any of the livestock workshops, these are delivered by veterinarians, and the crop and plant workshops the messaging is delivered through certified crop advisors. And the benefits of attending one of these workshops is, of course, access to some of the grant programs, but also understanding the benefits of why biosecurity is important to you, to help look at your current practices and ways that you could reduce risk, as well as working with that veterinarian or certified crop advisor to enhance some of your protocols on farm. All of the information on workshops, as well as some of the programs, is available through our website, ontariosoilcrop.org. And on that, I'm going to switch over now to discuss with you some of the grant opportunities that are covered under a large federal funding program called the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. This is a federal provincial delivered program, and we are currently in year 4 of this 5-year program. It is the follow-up to Growing Forward or Growing Forward 2, which some of you might be familiar with those program names. There's a whole range of different project categories that producers are eligible to apply for. And really it focuses on eligibility for people that are actively producing agricultural commodities in Ontario, have a farm business registration number, or they're able to provide an exemption, have a valid premise ID number. If you don't know what that is or how to obtain one, we can help you with that as well. It is a free number that's eligible to access through any property owner. And be able to meet all applications requirements, such as things like having completed the required workshop, or what other project requirements might be required to have been completed, like having a quote or having somebody come in and do an assessment on your farm operation. New producers can access this funding program, but only in certain categories. So things like planning, audits, assessments, or skills development or training type project categories, those are accessible for new producers, but any of the infrastructure or equipment expenditures, those project categories would be eligible only for those that have a current farm business registration number. So there's three main priority areas in the program: economic development, which covers business plans, marketing plans, labor productivity as examples. I'm not going to cover those project categories today. I'm going to speak a little bit about the plant health project categories that that are under the protection and assurance, but we do also have animal health and welfare type projects, as well as food safety. And both the animal health and plant health projects would require completion of those biosecurity webinars or workshops that I mentioned. And lastly, the environmental stewardship is the third priority area. And these projects surround support for improving soil health and water quality. And that's what I'm going to focus most of my time with you here today, to explain those project categories and what they might look like in terms of opportunities for you on your farm properties. So under environmental stewardship, you will see there's a wide range. There's actually 13 different project categories that follow under environmental stewardship grant opportunities. So things like nutrient management and soil health planning is covered. That would be working with a consultant to put together a nutrient management plan or strategy, or put together a full soil health plan, as far as including soil tests, fertilization recommendations, and a crop rotation schedule. So that's one's really consultant driven, working, as I say, with a certified crop advisor or other industry professionals. The cover crop project area is just that. It will provide you funding to purchase seed mixes for your cover crops. It will cover your time as well as equipment needs to either have it custom planted or for you to do the planting work yourself. Adding organic amendments to soil is another project category. And that will include the purchase of organic matter, manure sources, etc., and the transportation costs, as well as the spreading costs, to improve the organic makeup of your soil. Fragile land retirement, buffer strips, windbreaks, and wind strips are three other project categories, again, all eligible for funding sources, as are erosion control structures. So any slumping stream banks, any upgrades as far as tile outlets, water sediment control basins, grassed waterways, all of that would be covered under the erosion control structures. Moving into some of the equipment that's eligible for project funding, we do have a funding source to address soil compaction on farms. So here we'd be thinking of things like tracks, low pressure radial, tire updates, tire inflation, deflation systems on some of our heavier, bulky equipment like liquid manure tanks or grain buggies or anything like that. We've also got equipment modifications to improve manure applications. So this could be adding dribble bars, or switching over to a vertical beater manure spreading equipment, or injection systems, adding that onto your current manure equipment. Also under equipment, we do have a project category that covers tillage and nutrient application. So here we could be talking about strip till planters, no-till planters. It could be variable rate fertilizer equipment, fertilizer carts. So there's a whole slew of things, and so it doesn't necessarily need to be modifications. It could be new equipment or new to you equipment that you would be investing in and updating. Nutrient recovery from wastewater, wash water obviously has some water quality improvement as its main target. And so for dairy or poultry operations, how they're managing wash water, for some of our nursery operations or fruit and veg producers, also how they're managing the wash water in greenhouses, etc. That would be a project category that might be of interest. Manure storage improvements, as well as runoff control for livestock facilities. So 13 different project categories under the environmental stewardship, and I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples of how the funding works and what kind of dollars are available. So under cover crops, the program is covering eligible costs up to 50% to a max of $8,000. So in other words, you could spend $16,000 on cover crop seed and your time or equipment to plant that seed and be eligible then to receive $8,000 back. So that would be the max for that project category at the 50% cost share. Every producer can apply under 2 different project applications every time the program opens up, and we're in what we call an intake or an application window. A couple of other examples, we do have our manure application equipment. This one covers 40% up to a max of $20,000 that you could be reimbursed. Buffer strips, 50% up to $10,000 in this category. The soil compaction projects that I mentioned, so this too is a 40% project cost share up to a max of $20,000. And as I mentioned, it will cover track systems, inflation, deflation systems, as well as low pressure radial tires. On the erosion control structures, anything from ditch bank stabilization, some of the engineering costs may be associated with that, grassed waterways, eroded tile outlets. This one is a 50% project category up to a max of $20,000. Wash water, wastewater, this one covers 30% up to a max of $25,000. So some of our dairy producers might be interested in upgrades perhaps to how they're managing wash water in their milk houses, for example. No-till, strip-till, fertilizer carts, variable rate fertilizer, residue management updates to your planters, adding trash whippers, rollers, crimpers. All of those types of initiatives could be found under the tillage and nutrient application equipment modification category. And that's at the 40% cost share to a max of $20,000 that a producer could be reimbursed. Manure storage, 25% to a max of $20,000, could be liquid or could be how you're managing solid manure. And I mentioned about working with third-party advisors to develop plans, either nutrient management plans or soil health plans or water management plans, for example. All of those are funded at 50% cost share to a max of $10,000. And then just moving into the plant health project categories quickly, there are 5 project categories in this one. This is the category that does require the biosecurity workshop having been completed. The earlier ones, the environmental stewardship, do require the environmental farm plan workshop having been completed. So this one covers education, training, assessment, and planning for anything to do with plant health. Plant pest monitoring and management tools. I'll just give an example of that. So that could be things like lures, traps, microscopes, maybe adding dust deflectors onto a planter, or the purchase of drones to do some of that monitoring work for you. Eligible costs of this are 35% to a max of $25,000. We've also got preventing introduction and spread of pests. So this could be methods to reduce spray drift. It could be putting in designated laneways or gating, maybe adding an equipment wash bay to help reduce risk of transferring disease or resistant crops from one field or one farm to another. And this one covers funding at 35% cost share to a max of $50,000. Continuous rinse systems added on to our sprayers. This would be a 50% category to a max of $2,500. And just by way of letting you know, 2 applications can be submitted at any time by any producer, only during application intakes. This is not a program that we will reimburse people after they've completed the project. They do have to apply first, get approved, and only eligible and complete applications will be considered. It is a competitive process, so there are merit assessment criteria. That is, the best projects are the ones that receive and are eligible for the funding allocation. Currently, the best way to stay up to date on when the program is open and accepting applications is to access or sign up for email notices. And that is all accessible through the Soil and Crop website. There's a place right there where you check signing up for periodic email alerts or program launches. All of the specific details can also be accessed through our website, ontariosoilcrop.org. Under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, we do have the program guide for this program that takes you over to a separate site called ontarioprogramguides.net. And on that particular site, you can look at all of the various project categories and find out the details under each one in terms of how it lays out what's eligible, what's not eligible, what the required documentation is to accompany your project application, and what those criteria are that the reviewers are using to assess and approve project applications. As a program lead, I'm always available and able to help you navigate some of these websites or give you some ideas if you've got a project in mind in terms of what's eligible or where it might be a fit under some of the programs. I just want to spend my last couple of minutes here with you going over a couple of other programs that might be of interest to you. These are 1 year at a time type programs, so this is separate from the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. They are species at risk type programs that we deliver on behalf of different ministries. The SARPAL one is funded through Environment and Climate Change, and it covers a couple of things that I think might be a fit for some producers. 50% project costs, and it does require that you've completed a 4th edition environmental farm plan and that if you don't have a farm business registration, your property is assessed as farmland. So it supports things like tree and shrub planting, grass strip, wetland restoration, grassland restoration, cross fencing for rotational grazing, fencing to exclude livestock from wooded areas, as well as grassland birds to get up and out of their nests before fields are hayed. We also have the SAR-FIP program, that's the Species at Risk Farm Incentive Program. It has varying cost share percentages, but each farm business is entitled to $20,000. And I appreciate that this is a little blurry, but I want to lay out a couple of the project categories that might be a fit or fall under this particular program. Native tree planting, grassland planting. We've got rotational grazing and fencing on this one, stream bank crossings, as well as livestock watering systems. So there could be a fit in this particular program for some producers that are looking to make improvements on their farms in these areas. Again, all of the details on the various programs, as well as the workshops that we run and offer, can all be accessed through ontariosoilcrop.org. And with that, I thank you for your attention and hope I can answer any questions. As I mentioned, I'm here to help you navigate these programs and access the resources that help you improve. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Colleen. And I would encourage everyone to reach out to her. She's a wealth of knowledge and regarding the programs with Ontario Soil and Crop, and we've worked with a number of landowners who've been successful in obtaining funding through these programming to put projects on their farms. The Raisin Region, as well as Alice, also can partner with the funding through Ontario Soil and Crop to help with the establishment of many of the types of projects Colleen was speaking about. I do apologize for the glitches that we did run into over the course of Colleen's presentation. We will endeavor to try and fix these glitches within the recording and provide a recording in the near future that will be hopefully smooth all the way through. Our next presenter is Jessica Herrington. Jessica is the RCA Stewardship Coordinator. She works with landowners who are interested in planting trees on their property and connects them with funding opportunities to help cover the costs of planting. Jessica will be speaking on the topic of tree planting funding opportunities. Welcome, Jessica.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jessica Herrington, and I'm the Stewardship Coordinator with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. And today I'm going to be talking about our forestry programs and services and what funding opportunities there are for tree planting. So most of our tree planting is run through our full service program, and the sites are able to accommodate 500 or more trees. Full service sites often are in block planting. We plant windbreaks and riparian buffers, and other projects with fewer trees can be considered on a case-by-case basis. We also offer over-the-counter seedlings. The minimum order is 10 trees or more, and the client is responsible for planting and tending for that. And I'll discuss that further later in the presentation. So our full-service tree planting includes the site plan, the map, the site preparation if required. It will include cold storage and delivery of the stock, and the RRCA staff will be doing the hand planting and will be assisting with the tending if required. And often it will include the survival assessments. The average cost for reference is $2 to $2.25 per tree for the full service program. And most of our tree planting runs through the 50 million tree program, and that's funded by through Forest Ontario by the federal government and sponsors. And so far, they've planted 30 million trees, and the minimum number of trees for this program is 500. And unfortunately, at this time, they are not able to offer subsidy for shrubs, but the per tree rate is $1.36 subsidy. And survival assessments are included in this. And if a site has less than 60% survival, then there is an opportunity for refill. Highway of Heroes is a campaign to plant 2 million trees as a tribute to Canadian soldiers. And this is an effort that's in partnership with the 50 million tree program. So properties that qualify for 50 million can receive an additional subsidy through Highway of Heroes if they're within 30 kilometer distance from the 401 highway. And the subsidy rate for this is 34 cents per tree. Alice, Ontario East also offers subsidy for tree planting. So the goal of Alice is to retire marginal, inefficient, and fragile farmland and convert it into natural areas. And this can include tree planting and shrubs as well, other habitat enhancement. And funding for the projects is based on the budget of that year, but Alice aims to assist with the establishment costs, and they also offer an annual payment for project maintenance. The Raisin is currently partnering with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks through their Great Lakes Local Action Fund to plant 10,000 trees and shrubs along riparian areas on agricultural land. And the costs for these projects are fully covered by the fund. And the Raisin also submits applications to other funders, for example, Trees Canada. And this fund requires the site to have 8,000 or more trees being planted. And again, the project costs are fully covered. And on an annual basis, the Raisin is continually looking for funding for tree planting. Under circumstances where funding cannot come from 50 million or otherwise, Forest Ontario does have an over-the-counter subsidy program. So anyone who's purchasing trees through the Raisins over-the-counter program will receive a tree subsidy of 25 cents per tree. And again, these are trees that are being planted and tended by the landowners. And if anyone has any questions, I will be here at the end of the presentations to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for that overview. So that concludes our 4 presentations for today. And I will now pass the mic, as it were, over to my colleague, Lisa, who will moderate the question and discussion period.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa from the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. Just 1 second. I'm going to switch screen. All right. I'm going to ask the presenters to unmute themselves and turn their cameras on. So we have Ruth, Colleen, and There's Kevin, Jessica. Fantastic. All right, so we had a couple of questions that came in. Thank you to the presenters and everyone that asked questions. The first question was to Kevin. Ruth asked, are the tools you described applicable to improving the capacity to keep water on the field?
Yeah, I guess the tools per se aren't necessarily doing it, but the selection that people make within those tools, like obviously if you're seeing, you know, erosion problems or you want to establish buffers, you know, those activities are ultimately going to help improve infiltration and that type of thing. But yeah, it's kind of an indirect way of tackling it, I guess.
Thank you. Ruth, did you have any more questions about that, or did that answer your question?
Kevin, good to see you.
Yep. Hello.
It's more of a mindset, because oftentimes we're thinking of, you know, the times where you have excessive water and we're trying to get rid of it. But
Right.
is it an equal sort of opposite equation in terms of being able to maintain more water availability in the field?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one in Ontario, just because I would say generally, I mean, we're setting it up for the non-growing season when we have more water than we need. And then when we get to a time like this time of year, we don't have enough water that we need. So yeah, that's tougher to manage, but taking advantage of your soil storage capacity is probably all we got, unless you actually built some kind of a storage system to take that non-growing season water and moving to the growing season. And that's where improving your soil macroporosity and your soil, you know, structure and stuff like that, aggregate, all that kind of stuff can help with that. And that's where hopefully those soil health practices that, you know, the things you're identifying in the soil health plan or whatever can help out with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth and Kevin. The next question, actually there are a couple of questions, are from Ron Brennan. So his questions are for Colleen. He wants to know, actually his first question is for Colleen. So how do we know when the application process is open? I believe this may have been in regard to the environmental farm plan.
Okay, so likely this was in regard to the Canadian Agriculture Partnership Funding Program. And yes, we do have to await the Minister of Agriculture making those decisions when the program is open and accepting applications. That's usually done through media releases, as well as some advertising when Soil and Crop is aware of when those dates will be. I strongly encourage producers to sign up for the email notifications, which is available through our website, and then you will get an email, obviously, when the program launches or changes are made. You'll get those notifications in that manner.
Great, thank you, Colleen. The next question, I'm going to ask Jessica to address this, is also from Ron Brennan. He's asking, how do we know if, or how does he know if his application has been received for the cover crop Agri-Action funding? I believe he's referring to the advisory services Agri-Action funding. He's wondering if and when he'll get an acknowledgement of the receipt of his application. So what are the next steps?
So right now, the RRCA and next week we'll be meeting with the steering committee to review them, and then we'll be contacted shortly after that. So
So that sounds good. Perhaps Jessica, you could directly contact Ron Brennan about his application in the interim to give him
Sure.
an update directly. All right, I will pass it back over to Brendan. Unless there are any other questions from the audience, I'll pass it back over to Brendan to wrap up.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Lisa. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this workshop series. We hope it has provided you with an overview of some of the best management practices which can be used to increase your farm's sustainability and overall health. Please stay tuned for our upcoming virtual tours in November, where you will be able to get a behind the scenes look at some of the BMP projects in our region. As mentioned earlier, the links to all the presentations in this workshop series will be made available to you online in the near future. I would ask that everyone please fill out the quick post workshop survey we have just sent to you. It will help us greatly refine and fine-tune potential future workshops. Lastly, I would like to thank Kevin and Ruth, Colleen, and Jessica for sharing their knowledge with us today. And a very special thanks, of course, to our partners. This workshop series is supported by the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, a 5-year federal, provincial, territorial initiative, and by Alice Canada, a community-developed, farmer-led program that works with farmers and producers to enhance valuable ecological services on their farms. Thank you, everyone who attended and presented. Have a great afternoon.